ready for story time? I'm going to go and give you the story about Chiron. It was many moons ago in which there was the Titan Kronos, okay, and there was a nymph. Kronos had the eye for the nymph. The nymph was absolutely beautiful. So as the Titan comes close to the nymph, you know, they start getting a little, you know, intimate, and they start, you know, kind of looking at each other, getting a little bit more intimate, and they became extremely intimate. At the moment that they're becoming intimate, Kronos' wife comes over and was like, holy smokes, I got caught in the act. So he became a horse. All right, again, you know, it's a god, so he can go and convert himself into whatever he wants to. At the moment that he converts himself into a horse, that's when the nymph kind of like conceives Chiron. The Titan just takes off. He goes, you know, back to where all the Titans are, you know, and Mount Olympus. Basically had a nice long talk with his wife, or his wife had a nice long talk with him. 9 months later, Chiron appears. When the nymph gave birth to him, I don't want to sound offensive, but this is how the myth goes. It says, whoa, this is one ugly kid. Did not like him at all, partly because he's half horse and he's half human. Once again, that's when Chiron, his father turned into a horse. All right, all good and dandy. Mom just definitely abandoned him. This is no. This is not my kid. I don't want to raise him. I don't want to be with him. So Chiron had his first abandonment. When he had his first abandonment, that was okay, because then his spiritual family came about. Then, you know, Apollo took him and he started teaching him a whole bunch of arts. He was very well versed in the healing arts. He was very well in all different type of arts. And he was an amazing, amazing person. He started off with healing. As he was healing, he was a very good healer. Why? Because he was taught by the mighty, mighty healers at that time. And with his friend Hercules, they were kind of like, you know, playing around, and Hercules hit him with an arrow. Chiron stayed with an arrow, and he stayed with that arrow for years and years and years and years. He did not want that arrow to be touched. The myth goes that as he had that arrow, he was an extreme healer, even though that he went and he isolated for many years. Now we're talking about somebody who's immortal. The pain was so excruciating. The more the pain, the better the healer he was. And he healed many from all different types of, you know, from all places. All right. He's tired. He's tired. He's in pain. He's suffering. And that's when he met Prometheus. Prometheus was also tired. He was in pain and he was stuck. As he was stuck, you know, Chiron came up to Prometheus and says, you know what? I'm going to give up my immortality and I'm going to give it to you. So then you can get out of where you are stuck at this very moment. And that's when Chiron finally is liberated, but as a god, Zeus says, you know what? You can't go to Hades. You're going to go up to the stars. And that's when he went up to the stars and he became the constellation of Sagittarius. Was that a cute story? Or do I just think it's absolutely amazing? So, a great healer, but he wasn't healing himself. So we're going to go to the next one over here, that Chiron's wounds basically allowed him to heal others, but where was he? What happened that he did not allow himself to heal himself? There was an issue, and the issue was his own abandonment, his own pained inner child that did not allow him or think that he even deserves. Think about it. Dad takes off. He goes into, Mount Olympus. He does whatever gods do. Mom took off too, abandoned him, and now he has two wounds, the mother wound and the father wound, in which he kept within himself. Now, but he gave and gave and gave to everybody else, but he didn't give to himself. So when it came down to this, and we're looking at the concept of the inner child, we're going to go and look at that the inner child is basically the unintegrated wounded inner child is basically manifested through, of course, our own overt wounds and our way of seeing and feeling the world. How does everybody feel about this so far?
I'm understanding.
Okay. So, and I think that we all can more or less, identify with this, because when we're looking at the inner child and we're looking at our own pain, anything on the outside is a trigger. So when we're going to go and look at the trigger, it can be people, it can be things in which they're going to come within ourselves and we'll go through our own perception. Through that perception, it's going to go down to the roots of whatever it is that's unintegrated. So now, how do I know? How can I go ahead and access that part of myself? Well, that's where Jung comes up and starts talking about integrating the shadow self. So I want to go on, I know I'm going to divert myself a little bit, but this is fascinating about the way that he came in contact with the shadow self. So Freud and Jung, they were very good friends at one point. Jung was more into the spiritual aspect. Freud wanted to put, psychiatry into the medical field and looking more that it's a medical issue, and that's where the medical model came in. But he basically wanted to put psychiatry within, the allopathic aspect. So he, at that moment, especially during the Victorian times, he went more into the sexual aspect. And once again, that's where the it came up. Freud was also interested in the spiritual, but trying to put, the psychiatry in the system, he kind of bypassed it. Jung underwent a psychotic break. All right, so we're going to use that language right now, which in a little bit we're going to shift it. At the moment that he is coming in contact with his psychotic break, they noticed, and especially his patient noticed, that he was extremely present with the other person. Why? Because A, he came in contact with the shadow self. B, he came in contact with the archetypes. And C, he also came up with the collective unconscious, which that we'll talk a little bit more later. When he went through the psychotic break, he didn't tell Freud because he knew exactly what was going to happen, that he was going to end up in what was called back in those days, the insane asylum. So he kept it to himself. And that's where he wrote the Red Book. The Red Book, the old Jungarians are trying to figure out what it meant, but it doesn't mean anything to us. Why? Because that was his own shadow self manifesting. And that's when he found out about the integration of the inner child. Now, of course, later on came the archetype, and also the integration of the shadow self, which later on he changed the word from psychotic break into a spiritual emergency. And that's absolutely fascinating. So now we're changing the language to come in contact with our own humanness. When he came up with the wounded healer, he really wasn't referring too much about us. We're taking, that particular definition, incorporating in our lives. He came more in contact with the physician. So basically, he was basically saying that a person who understands the other person through compassion and empathy is the one that comes in contact with themselves. So once again, coming in contact with our own woundedness, coming in contact with our own humanness, coming in contact, with the inner child is what creates our empowerment and healing. So here's a little bit more about, which later on, we can read it with a little bit more time, but it's basically that self-knowledge. So it's like, okay, all good and dandy. What does that have to do with me? And how do I go ahead and come in contact with this? So here we go. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. So whatever it is that I am with another person, and whatever it is that I don't like about them, that would be my trigger to come within myself. So let's say, for example, I'm going through some type of depression or anxiety. And I don't know if anybody has come, a while ago about the hearing voices. Was that something that I do at the hospital? Actually, without, tooting my own horn, we are the only hospital that has the hearing voices group. But that's besides the point. Here we're looking at, there's going to be triggers all over. So it is my responsibility to acknowledge whatever the trigger is, and basically through self-reflection and self-understanding and responsibility, I need to access the root of that particular pain. Because if I don't come in contact with that particular pain, it's going to come out symbolically through voices, visions, obsessive thinking, depression, anxiety, isolation. Is going to come in contact with our pain. Any comments, any feedback so far? 100%. Absolutely. You're absolutely right. Because think about it. The only way that I can have any compassion or empathy towards another person, all right, is me coming in contact with my own pain. So when Jung says, well, what makes a good doctor? A good doctor makes somebody that is empathetic and compassionate. But what makes that doctor empathetic and compassionate and have a state of presence? Well, the person has to be in contact with themselves. And that's where this comes in right now, about how, and once again, we're all human. And of course, everybody is in their own developmental stage. Not everybody is going to be empowered. Not everybody is going to be enlightened. Not everybody is going to be in contact with themselves. Our goal is to start working on it. We have a whole lifetime in order to achieve it. So where do I start? I start in the now. I start in this moment. As long as I have that acknowledgement within myself. But then again, it is my responsibility to do it. A lot of times, we do resort, well, I'm feeling depressed or I'm feeling too anxious. Let me go into pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceuticals is okay on a temporary basis, as long as I come in contact within my own self. And I see that a lot in the groups. We start off with a lot of medication. And once that we come in contact with ourselves, the medication goes down. Why? Because the coping skills are the ones that will create, believe it or not, will create for the serotonin, the dopamine, all those good neurotransmitters in order to be heightened and to go back into, a state in which we start operating before we had the depression or the anxiety. So here is, coming in contact with our own inner child. And before, it just came into my mind right now. Another good way of coming in contact with my inner child is through children. If we have small children at home or, neighbors or grandchildren, when we are in contact with children and coming and feeling what we're feeling at the moment, that we are in contact. So the children are a trigger to the inner child. So now if I'm feeling sad or I'm feeling anxious or whatever it is that I'm feeling at the moment, I can go and work through with the child. How so? And now we'll go into, for example, allowing ourselves to play. But before I allow myself to play, I have to go ahead and look at, where is this wound really coming from? So being raised by human parents, our human parents are going to err. And by erring, that's when, we're going to be feeling in a certain way. So it's that humanness that we're picking up at that moment was going to create the wound. And that wound is going to create later on the overt symptomology, depression, anxiety, voices, visions, whatever it is, OCD. It doesn't really matter. But it's that wound that's going to create that. So here are some examples: the abandonment wound, feeling left out, fears of abandonment, not wanting to be alone, codependency. Okay, the guilt wound, feeling sorry or feeling bad, oh, I can do it all by myself. I'm not going to ask anybody for help. Guilt and manipulation. The trust wound. Here we go. I don't want to get in contact with anybody. I don't want to get close to anybody because I know that that person is going to abandon me just the same way I was abandoned before. The neglect wound, struggles to let go of things. A lot of people, and it's very interesting because a lot of people become, quote unquote, the hoarders. All right. Not that I can say much because as you can see, I'm full of books over here, but, becoming hoarders, holding on to stuff. Why? Because that stuff, those items were not present while growing up. And once again, with the neglect wound comes low self-worth. Lots of anger. Now, why is that person so angry all the time? Well, that person is angry because that person is wounded. But there's going to be some type of, for example, denial of the anger and the rage. Why? Because once again, it goes up to the abandonment. So all of these are intertwined because with each wound, there's going to be abandonment and there's going to be guilt given. And there, with the abandonment, there's going to be trust issues. And then with the trust and the abandonment, there's going to be neglect. So this is part of the human condition, though, that even if we come from, they say the perfect parent or the loving parent, that parent had to take care of their own selves at that moment. And that's when, we may be feeling in a certain way. Any questions, any comments so far? Can we relate?
Hi, I have a question.
Yes.
Okay. I'm interested in the abandonment wound. Normally attracts emotionally unavailable people.
Yep.
So I was wondering if you could speak a little more to that.
Absolutely. So here's the situation. Now, here we go. So that is the seed of this, right? So with the seed of, I have been abandoned and I'm going to go ahead. It's called compulsion repetition, right? I'm going to go ahead and say, you know what? I'm going to be attracting people who are going to abandon me again. So with the repetition compulsion, it's a very bizarre way of saying, I'm going to keep on allowing myself to get abandoned in order to make this right. Doesn't make sense, does it? But that's where that compulsion comes from. Why? Because there is that void. we're going to talk a little bit more about this in way how I, as an adult, and we do this a lot when in groups, we do this a lot. We go ahead and we start talking to our inner child. What does the inner child really want? Now, you know, he has been abandoned. How can we, as adults now, be the parent to that inner child? Because on a symbolic level, we are at that age, at the age of the abandonment, the age of the neglect, the very, very, very first time. So you know, I'm no longer 30. And that's why I tell everybody in group, I'm 30 years old. Yes, I'm in denial. And I'm also delusional. I'm no longer 30. I am 5 years old when I got abandoned the very first time. Does that kind of, but we're going to get a little bit more into that. Yeah. And how to start dealing with it.
Thank you.
So here it is.
Cristina?
Yes.
What's the difference between an abnormal fear of being hurt versus it's okay, like the normal fear of being hurt?
Okay, once again, it goes on the degree of hurt, of pain. So, okay, I'm going to be extreme. All right. So I'm going to go and talk about like a lot of folks in group talk about. So I can be pained because I was abused, physical, emotional, sexually. All right. So, okay. So I am going to have severe pain. Now there's going to be not only an emotional, spiritual shift in me, but also there's going to be a neurological shift in me. Because now when we're going off in any type of abuse, for example, right? I don't like to use that word, but I'm using that on a mechanistic level. So then, you know, we can all understand each other. Because if we were looking at abuse, there's going to be some type of judgment with it. Here, we're not looking at judgment. We're looking at what transpired in our lives. So if I'm going to be, you know, wounded in such a you know, profound way, I'm going to have that mind-body shift. So now, if it was repetitive and I had absolutely nobody in my life, nobody, in order to hold me at the moment that it happened, that wound is going to be extremely profound. And that's when it will become, for lack of a better word, pathological, if that makes sense. Why? And then that's, and I see this a lot with folks that, you know, hear voices, for example, and, you know, or have a pervasive thought. With those thoughts and with that voice, it's going right back down to the original wound. But here's the whole thing though. Right now, we're all here. So since we're all here, there was at least one person in our lives that squished us, smooched us, and told us that we were the center of their universe. If that person did not exist, we would not be here right now. So we are able now, knowing with that notion, all right, which isn't on a cellular level, that we have been loved, that we'll be able to deal with these type of wounds. Did that kind of answer it?
Yes, it did. Thank you so much.
Okay. So here we go. This is, you know, this is just to have an idea. The mother wound and the father wound. And this one is, you know, the father wound, once again, let's say, well, my dad was never in the picture, you know, such as Chiron's dad, not in the picture whatsoever. But the primordial, you know, the most important wound, the most important abandonment was there. So here's the trust issues. Father is not fully present, may experience lack of trust towards yourself or others. But we're not looking only as not present physically, but also present emotionally. pops can be, you know, watching TV, you know, and flipping channels and not know that anybody else exists. So once again, on an emotional level, that person is not there. Physically, they're there, but emotionally not. Then comes the other aspect, you know, that the father is going off and saying that you're not good enough, not worthy, you don't deserve it. The abandonment issues, once again, the father can be emotionally or physically unavailable. And we always want, you know, that type of connection with our parents. You know, I want, you know, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z in order for dad to accept me. But then again, if a father is not there emotionally or cognitively as well, then these type of wounds will come up. And here comes the abuse. You know, either watching how father abused mother or father abusing the children, that also will create these issues. And once again, it will create a replica of this particular situation. So I'm going to be perhaps attracting people who are going to do exactly the same thing to me, not only because I witnessed it, but also because I am not deserving. This is basically how I'm supposed to be treated, because my self-esteem, my self-worth is so low at that moment because of the way that I was indoctrinated, because of I was, you know, treated because of my father's, okay, or my caretaker's projection towards me, displacement towards me. Once again, children are extremely concrete and very, very, very self-centered. So if mom and dad, let's say, for example, especially at the age of 5, 6, 7, mom and dad are arguing, it's not because they are arguing because they are not getting along. It's because I did something in order for that to happen. So now I am taking responsibility for other people's behavior. And once again, that's where the caretaker comes in. I like to take care of everybody. I want to heal everybody. Once again, just like Chiron, I want to heal everybody, but here I got my wound and I'm not taking care of it. Why? Because of this and because of this, the mother wound. So with the mother wound, and we can read that, we can come back to that later. With the mother wound, once again, is very, very devastating. Because on a social level, mom should be the caretaker. Mom should be the one who saves the children, nurtures the children, loves the children on a social level. This is the, you know, the archetype of the good mother. But then again, mom is human. And if mom went through the same thing as I'm going through, then that particular way of being, that particular way of feeling about myself really didn't come from me as generational. And that's where the generational wound comes. So here's a situation that I am aware now that I have these wounds. I am aware that perhaps mom and dad, they were treated exactly the same way as I'm being treated. I'll never forget. My daughter was, where was she? She was in grammar school. And then one of the little girls comes up to the mother and says, oh, you know, why is it that you always do the same thing? Why is it that you can't do this, you know, or why can't you just say yes to something that I'm asking? Well, and then the mother responded, which I didn't say anything. I kept myself very quiet. Says, well, my mother did that to me, so I'm going to do that to you too. Well, here we go. Let's go ahead and, yeah, it's a learned behavior, but we're basically perpetuating the wound. She didn't break the chain at that moment, but we are, because now we have a new understanding about ourselves. Any questions, comments, feedback so far?
I suppose you're going to get into how this is integrated with CBT, since you also do CBT.
Yes, correct. Yeah, we're going to get there. We're going to get there. Yep. So here we go. So this is about the wounded inner child and, you know, how the wounded inner child manifests him or herself. Once again, depression, anxiety, voices are partly the result of unintegrated trauma. So our responsibility is in order to come in contact with it. So here's more on the mother wound. And once again, you know, this is more for educational purposes, because once that I'm starting feeling, you know, any of this is something that I, as a responsible being who wants to empower and grow, it's like, oh, you know what? I'm going to be using this as a template. So now I know how to start going ahead and integrating my particular trauma. And this is how we start. To find the light, you must embrace the inner child and the shadow self. So what is really telling us right now, when I'm embracing my inner child and the shadow self, what is that saying about me? What am I doing right now? I am. Any thoughts, any ideas? I'm acknowledging, accepting myself for who and what I am. Because I am a whole being. I am already. So what I need to do is acknowledge, accept it, and embrace it. So once that I do, what are the thoughts right now? How do I start going ahead and here and starting to heal? And this is what I started doing right now with the inner child work, is connecting with that symbolic inner child. So how do we start doing that? First is acknowledge. Once that I acknowledge whatever it is that I'm feeling, I need to accept it. With responsibility, self-responsibility, of course, self-responsibility. And then later on, you know, with self-reflection, I need to choose to sit on the seat of pain or sit on the seat of empowerment. Which of the two do I choose? So if I'm going to be asking you, which one do you choose at this very moment? To sit on the seat of pain and continue with the pain, just like Chiron did, you know, with the arrow in his back, or do you choose to take out the arrow and sit on the seat of empowerment? So should we go that we want empowerment?
Absolutely.
Yes.
There you go.
Yes.
Perfect. That's what, and exactly, that's what we want. And it's interesting too, because a lot of you know, was like, let me think about it a little bit. Because remember, when you start doing this type of work, and it's a very painful, I'll tell you that right now, you know, I continue doing my own inner child work. It's very painful because now I'm letting go of a behavior or thought, okay, that I've been holding on to perhaps all of these years until now. And then all of a sudden, I'm going to start forming a new pathway. Now, remember, the new pathway is not going to be only on an emotional, spiritual level, but it's also going to be on a biological level. So I have to start forming neuroplasticity. So that means that I have to start changing the behavior and I have to start changing my thought. Magical number, nobody knows why. I have to repeat something 21 times over. And that's where the positive, Debbie, I think you were asking about the positive affirmations and the cognitive restructuring.
Yes.
So, meditation. Why is meditation so incredibly important? There's a reason why.
Keeps you in the present.
You got it. Absolutely. You got it. When John Kabat-Zinn went to the East in order to study meditation, and he came back with it, and he says, oh my goodness, it's the best thing ever. But that folks over there have been using it since the dawn of civilization. Excuse me. What was the difference between, why did John Kabat-Zinn become so incredibly known in the meditation, circle? Is because he took the meditators into an MRI machine, and he realized through the studies that meditation and staying present revamps the prefrontal lobe, which is where we make decisions, our rationality, all right, and this is where the sense of self is located, or so they claim. So now staying in the moment, staying present, just like, Carl Jung, when he had his psychotic break or his spiritual emergency, whichever way you like to put it, he was there in the moment. So if I'm meditating and I'm staying in the moment, I'm able to come in contact, with the triggers. It could be an outside trigger or an internal trigger. And then I can start acknowledging what I'm feeling. If not, I'm going to be in denial, or I'm just going to be rationalizing. And that's not what I want to do, because that's not going to assist me to heal. So journaling is good. Some folks say, I can't write. I don't like to write. Drawing is extremely important too, because sometimes we can't come in contact with the words. Have you folks ever heard of alexithymia? No, never heard of it. Alexithymia is the state that I do not know what I'm feeling. And a lot of times that I do not know what I'm feeling comes once again from our own woundedness. When we're growing up, we're taught our emotions. So if nobody taught me emotions, I can't come in contact with them. So if I can't come in contact with them, I can't journal. What am I going to write? But if I go and draw them out, or if I put like colors to whatever it is I'm feeling, that's how I can go ahead and start coming in contact of what my woundedness is about, and also how deep my woundedness is. Play. Extremely important. When was the last time anybody played? That long ago, huh? Okay.
With my newborn great niece last week.
There you go. Wonderful. And that's what we need to do. Play. Oh, but Cristina, you're an adult. Why don't you just grow up and just stay an adult? No, I want to play. So playing, and that's where, with your great niece, once that we start playing with the children, all right, our inner child is also playing. And as the inner child is playing, we're allowing ourselves right now to allow that child, the inner child, to feel comfortable, and also to feel that it's in a safe environment. How does everybody feel? Yes.
Cristina, we have a question in the chat. Can you access it, or do you want me to read it for you?
Hold on a second. Oh, shoot.
No worries. It's from Vanessa, and okay. She's asking, Vanessa, do you want to speak? Okay, her question is.
Yes, thank you. The question is, a couple of slides before you talk about voices.
Yes.
When you talk about those voices, are you talking about what happened with schizophrenia, or it's more like your internal thinking, your internal voices, that what exactly are you referring to?
It can be both, absolutely. You know, when we do the hearing voices group, we talk about pervasive thinking, and we also talk about voices. It can be disembodied voices, or it can be a voice in our head, or it can be a voice in our body part. Okay. That voice, all right, and it could be also be our own conscious thinking, all right. That voice is attached, all right, to two things. It can be our higher self, you know, it can be the superego, it can be, you know, our connection to society and what was, you know, what was taught to us through society. It can be attached to the woundedness. It can be also attached to some type of adverse experience that's still unintegrated in us. So there's a real good book. I mean, if anybody has insomnia, read this book before going to bed, because it will really knock you out. In Search of the Consciousness Through the Bicameral Mind. That book tells us basically, Julian James, that's his name. He basically tells us that voice that we hear, all right, it could, and especially people who, you know, quote unquote, have schizophrenia or psychosis for that matter, is part of us, of course, but that part of us, okay, is kind of like disassociated. But we need to listen to that voice. That voice basically tells us where we are at the moment. So let's say, for example, oh, you know, oh, Cristina, you know, you're dumb and stupid. You know that, right? You know, oh, don't do that because you're fat. Oh, don't do that because you know, you're useless, you're worthless. That voice is telling me about my own self-esteem. Did that kind of help you, Vanessa?
Yeah, I don't know whether it helps her or not, but it doesn't help me at all. Okay.
It does not help you?
Yes,
no, it doesn't.
Yes. Yeah, but you were mentioning the four types of wounds, and yes, you were mentioning that it can go to your emotional, like your inner child, but it can go deeper into your biological. And I was thinking that may be that you're referring to the link of the roots of schizophrenia. I was a little bit confused about that, but thank you. Definitely you clarify what I was thinking. Thank you.
Well, yeah, okay, so here we go. So we really don't know. Nobody knows about where schizophrenia comes from. You know, independent studies basically say that, you know, people who hear voices have exactly the same, but this is before medication, that exactly the same brain structure and neurotransmitters as a person who does not hear voices. So now the medication later on, of course, is going to change the brain structure. But they even did studies in which people who do hear voices, the auditory part of their brain lights up. So now they're saying, where does the voices really come from? We don't know. We don't know. Does medication help? For some people, it does. But then some people still hear voices. I have one of my patients, basically. He's on a lot of medication and he still hears voices. So what do? We start coping with them. And, you know, there was another patient that she feels and hears things as well. And we mapped it down that what she feels is basically an unresolved, unintegrated trauma with the ultimate abandonment from her mom. So we're also going to be looking at the validation. So we do this in group a lot. Visualizing ourselves and visualizing, if we have a picture of ourselves when we were growing up, and visualizing ourselves at that age, you know, that maybe we feel or thought that the wound started or we were wounded, and just embracing. This is the whole thing. When we're thinking about or visualizing, the body doesn't know the difference. So I can be visualizing, holding my inner child and telling my inner child, oh, little Cristina, you're going to be, I'm here with you. I'm going to be protecting you as an adult. I'm going to protect you, but I'm also going to listen to you. Now the body is going to be reacting to it. Mind-body integration, biopsychoimmunology. And they're doing a lot of studies on biopsychoimmunology, not only the way that we feel and start integrating, but also in terms of any type of physiological issue. Because once again, the mind, what happens is when any type of woundedness comes and that psychological, spiritual wound is there, the weaker part of our body is going to be affected. They did a lot of studies, in which, let's say, for example, cardiovascular issues. And I'm not talking about when we're getting older in age. That's something, diet and stress and all that stuff will do it. But we're talking about younger people who are having, any type of heart or hypertension or whatever. And a lot has to do with pain, the spiritual pain that we must go through, the emotional pain of either the mother, the father wound, or any other type of wound. And that's where we come in as responsible, empowered beings and saying, I'm going to start changing my thought. That's where the CBT comes in. I'm going to start changing my thinking. I'm going to start negating my negative self-talk. Oh, double negative right there. But I'm going to start taking away my negative self-talk, and I'm going to start talking my inner child, and I'm going to start looking at myself with no judgment. I'm going to start looking at my inner child with no judgment. But the most important one, I'm going to start looking at my woundedness with no judgment. Because a lot of times with society, they do have that judgment. Doesn't matter if I was wounded or I wounded somebody else, there's going to be judgment. When it comes down to healing, judgment has to be eliminated. How does everybody feel about that? So we'll go to the next. So here we go. So once again, here comes the CBT, changing the thought that I have. The wounded inner child. I always mess up everything. So I want to ask, the group. That thought, I always mess up everything. Does that come from the child or was it given to the child?
Given.
Absolutely, 100%.
It was given to the child.
Absolutely right. So now, here's the situation. If something was given to me, and the way that I feel about myself is really based on what was given to me, then I have to ask myself the following question. Why am I holding on to it? Why am I holding up? Oh, I always mess up everything. Everything is my fault. Why am I such an idiot? I'm fat and ugly. Nobody's going to love me. That was given to me. So my self-esteem, my self-worth is based on the gaze of the other. And the other person gazed me in a way in which I feel undeserving, I feel ugly, I feel dumb, I feel stupid, or whatever judgmental thing that I may be thinking about myself. Then why am I holding on to it? So any thoughts and comments about that though?
It's hard to let go. You have to confront. And, I think we all would prefer not to have confrontations. It's much easier. We think it's easier to avoid rather than confront.
Yes, you got it.
That's true. Yes, I agree.
Right? Okay. Once again, here's the situation. And you're absolutely right, Debbie. This is the situation. who am I? Who do I really need to confront right now? I'm the one who has that negative thought. I'm the one who has, that, negative self-talk. Or like the cognitive restructurers talk about, the cognitive dissonance. It's a nice fancy word. Or, irrational thinking. Sounds judgmental too. I'm the one who has it. So should I confront myself now and say, hey, Cristina, why are you thinking like that? No, stop thinking like this. I'm going to go and think in another way. But I need to do something in order for that to happen. What is it that I need to do for myself? I need to give myself permission. I need to give myself permission that what I'm going to say to myself and that positive thing that I'm going to say to myself, and here's the word, okay, that was taken away from us. I deserve it. You know why I deserve it? This is my birthright. Any comments, questions about that? So it's my birthright to feel loved. It's my birthright to heal. It is. I'm here on earth to fulfill, that's one of my purposes. And if it's not going to be my greatest purpose, because if I don't heal myself, I can't have compassion and empathy towards anybody else. If I don't heal myself, my children, right, will perhaps, maybe not, right, because they may break the chain, but I'm going to give that to my children too.
Yeah.
So that's where I come in right now in order to go ahead and at least start. And where do I start?
Cristina, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So you've raised more than one child.
Yes.
And I suppose it is possible that in the course of being a parent, that you may change your so-called parenting skills. But why is it that one child struggles so much with all this, and yet another child seems so perfectly balanced?
That's a good question.
It is a good question, right? Don't forget, Debbie, we come into the world with a temperament. That's the biological component, right? At the moment of conception and, in our mother's womb. With that temperament, okay, so let's say, for example, I had, one child at the age of 30, and I had the other child at the age of 32, and the other child at the age of 35. So now each one is with different temperaments, right? But then comes the other aspect. I'm not the same person when I was 30, 32, and 35. I'm not the same person. I am the same person, but I'm not going to be treating the same way, because on a maturational level, 30, 32, and 35, I'm different. Then comes the other social aspects that is different too. And then comes the other, variables, because now I don't have one, now I don't have two, now I have three. And trillions of other variables too. Because then comes the aspect, each one of us is different.
Thank you.
And it's interesting because I say, for example, my brother and I were 9 years apart. And then he sees the family in one way. I'm like, I don't know who you're talking about, but I don't see it that way. Why? Because I was 9 years before him. So, the way that mom and dad were with me and the way mom and dad were with him is totally different. And then comes the cultural aspect too. you know, in Latin American family, you know, it's like, you know, preference perhaps, or whatever it is. And then the 9 years too, they're totally different people, even though the same parents. But the way that they raised me and the way they raised him in different countries also comes into effect. Yeah.
Miss Christina.
Yes.
And let's don't forget that everybody has their own experiences.
Yes.
And sometimes parents are not the only caregivers.
Yes.
Maybe mom was full present when the oldest was over there, but then grandma came and helped with raising the other children. I mean, not everybody have the same exact experiences.
Correct. Right. Right. Those are the other variables that are so important too, that makes, you know, one child cope differently than the other child. Yeah, you're right. Because you got all of these other factors coming in and other people coming in. And then, you know, comes the cultural aspect, and then comes the societal aspect too, that influences. So here's different ways of reparenting ourselves, right? And once again, you know, once that I start giving myself permission to go ahead and reparent myself, or give myself permission to love myself, that's where the healing starts. And that's when I can also set healthy boundaries. And that's when I can also come in contact with my inner child and start basically telling my inner child how amazing she is, or he is. Okay. Here's another. So when our wounds cease to be the source of shame and become the source of healing, we have become wounded healers. Once again, here, you know, Jung talked more about the physician, and we're going to take it within our own selves. When you look at shame and guilt, and I put it has no ethical and no philosophical implication to healing. Shame and guilt are social constructs. Shame and guilt are given to us when we're growing up, and also by society for social control. If I want to go, you know, up and down the boulevard wearing only a pot on my head and calling myself a pothead, okay, you know where I'm going, right? Once again, you know, says, well, why didn't you wear anything else other than the pot over your head, right? They're giving me shame. Oh, look at you. You caused all of this traffic. All right. Now they were giving me, you know, more shame and perhaps guilt if there was a car accident. By looking at that, that would have been a spectacle. So here I am, right, saying, and I hear this a lot with folks that have been abused. Well, I was abused because I didn't stop it. I was abused because I'm no good. I was abused because I was afraid. And it goes on and on and on and on and on endlessly, which has nothing to do with the child. It has to do with what was given to the child. But now the child has the shame and guilt. But it was given to the child. So now, how do I come in contact with myself and start healing the shame and guilt? To want to give myself permission in order to start doing it. I can go to, there's a lot of groups, you know, NAMI and NAMI Greater Bergen has a plethora of groups that we can go to in order to start dealing with this. DBT groups, there's a lot of them out there too. 12-step fellowship groups, there's a lot of them. There's one is called ACOA, adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families, that's a tearjerker right there. But they get down to the nitty gritty, and then they come to the core of our woundedness. So here comes my guru, words of wisdom from Carl Jung. I am not what happened to me, but what I choose to become. What are the thoughts and feelings about this quote?
It's very powerful because you have control.
Yes.
Somebody else doesn't control you. You make the decision. You make the choice. You accept responsibility for your happiness.
Oh, 100%. You're right. You're absolutely right. But once again, I got to give myself permission to do that. You know why I got to give myself permission to do that? Because it's my birthright. It's my birthright. Period. I came into this world with my own temperament, and then, nurture took over. But ultimately, I'm the one who chooses.
Yeah, Cristina, that also dovetails Oprah's new book.
Mm-hmm.
When she talks about don't ask what's wrong with you, ask what happened to you.
Okay, there you go. Yes, absolutely. 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 Because once again, but think about this too. I can look at what happened to me once again, like in the other side with shame and guilt. I can look at it myself with it like that. Or I can go and say, you know what? I went through that, and we can go and we can use our imaginations, or we can look at within our own selves what we went through and say, I am resilient. I am wise. I came in contact with it. So now I am compassionate and empathetic. They talk about sublimation, right? So sublimation is the seed of society and culture. So whatever it is that I'm feeling, I go and convert it in order for it to be something good for society. So now here's my woundedness, here's my pain. I gave myself permission in order to re-permit myself. I gave myself permission to love myself. So now I am going to go back out in society, and I'm going to go ahead and be of service to society. Viktor Frankl talked about that. That a very nice book. It's a good read. It's a very good read. It's a small book, Man's Search for Meaning. And that basically is what we talk about. When he was in the concentration camp, they gave him a potato. So he had his fellow, person in the concentration camp, and that one potato, he cut it in half. Now there's two people eating the potato. Now there's two people who are content, but not only that, two people who bonded. So now here's my woundedness. Yeah, I understand my woundedness, because now I'm taking care of my woundedness. I'm going to go ahead and extend myself to the other person. Now it's two wounded people coming together, but each other helping each other. So once again, it's what I choose to do at the moment. And
Cristina, I have a question.
Sure.
My name's Pilar. So this all, and I'm enjoying this session very much, thank you. But this all works if the person is willing to accept that, instead of blaming other people, blaming the mother or blaming the father, they decide that they're going to take ownership of their life and move forward, as long and not, even if that means not connecting with parents again or whatever, that in order for them to heal. To disconnect in order to heal, because the pain is too strong to be around the people he feels have caused him the pain.
Right. Okay, that's a tough one right there. That's a call within. It's an ethical, cultural call within each person. But whoever comes into the group, everybody knows Uncle Stu. This is my exam, and I was like, oh, I hate Uncle Stu. So Uncle Stu, molested me from the age of 5 to 15, right? So I give that example, and I give the example about the external cues and where do I start healing? So now, do I continue talking to Uncle Stu? Well, depends on the degree of my woundedness. If my woundedness is so deep that, and this person really hurt me that much, why do I want to continue talking to that person? Mm-hmm. That's number one. Number two, I can also understand Uncle Stu. I understand where he's coming from. I'm not condoning his behavior, because that's the last thing I'm going to do. I'm not going to excuse his behavior, because that's the last thing I'm going to do. But I'm going to understand where he came from. Perhaps he was abused himself. Maybe the alcohol, the substances did it. Maybe the depression, or maybe antisocial personality disorder. We don't know. But we do know one thing, that as I'm healing my woundedness and I'm taking care of my inner child, I'm able to go ahead and start understanding that behavior. And that's when I choose. Do I choose to, to talk to him? Do I choose to stay away from him? But ultimately, I can only make that decision, and nobody else can. Now, when other people hold me hostage, though, that's a different story. Because and we know of a lot of people, even ourselves, mom and dad did this to me, and maybe mom and dad are no longer here on earth, but they're still holding, me hostage and feeling the way that I feel. I don't feel good about myself, my self-esteem, my self-worth, it's so low because what they did to me. Do they really deserve that much power over me? I'm here on earth for a purpose, and my purpose is in order to heal, so I can be of service to others. So I don't like the word deserve. What other word can we use, folks? Other than deserve. Should I still be attached?
But I owe it to myself.
Entitlement?
Yes.
But Debbie, what is it that you owe to yourself?
That I come first.
You got it. You got it. You're right. But I come first in order for me to heal, to start healing. Again, we're going to be on that path of healing until we take our last breath, and, when our Creator calls us back. All right. Until then, I'm going to be healing. So I have to be thinking about the following. The day that I am, going on the other side of the veil, do I want to bring myself, like a little case, or do I want to bring myself trunks and trunks and trunks of my unresolved issues? What do I choose? Which one do I want? I'd rather take something
little case.
Yeah, that's what I want to take. I don't want to take all that crap that that earthly crap with me. I don't. Because it belongs down here. It belongs over here. Why does it belong here? Because that's part of my humanness. Am I going to carry my humanness? Absolutely. Because that's who I am. But I need to accept that. And it's okay. It's okay. So, before we go to the meditation.
Excuse me.
Of course.
Can you hear me? I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes.
There was an article in the LA Times recently by a psychoanalyst, and she talked about estrangement in families, that it's becoming very common. And there's like 38,000 posts on Instagram from young people who talk about their toxic relationships with parents. And while I agree that sometimes you do need to have that estrangement, but I think a lot of times it is worth trying to, if you can, and again, I think each case, like you say, is very unique and you must look at each one individually. But it is worth trying to, I think, and the resolution of the article is to try to talk things through if you can, because there's a lot of psychological damage done by not trying to resolve, but by estrangement. And again, each case is different. But if you can try to have some, I use this term carefully, forgiveness or talking it through, because there's so much hurt. And I think parents do things and in their frustrations, and certainly not sexual abuse or that kind of thing, but a lot of emotional abuse is done sometimes because single parents are left with children. And I don't excuse any of this, but I'm saying I think parents are regretful sometimes when they see the product that, the things that they've done. And it's not to excuse them, but it would be good if it could be talked through.
And that's a very good point that you're raising. And you're right, you're absolutely right. So that's what, the power of forgiveness.
Yes.
Fred Luskin and Rita, we were talking about Fred Luskin before.
Yes.
My God, hold on a second. Now I'm blocking the title of the book. Forgive for love and forgive for good. And based on evidence, it's evidence-based, in the research that he did. And you're absolutely right. It is the forgiveness. It's breaking the emotional tie. Again, like you said, we're not condoning the behavior. We're not excusing the behavior. We're understanding the behavior. And a lot of times, and we talk a lot about this, years ago, I had private practice, and, I had a lot of young folks coming over, and they were talking about, the estrangement. They're talking about,
put them in here. Look, all these cards, Kavi, put them in here.
And talking about, the miscommunication that they had. And sometimes us as children, and can be adult children as well, we can be the role models of forgiveness, and we can be the role models also of communication.
All in there, all those cards.
Now it's up to the parents, it's up to the caretakers in order to deal with it. But from our part, we can go and say,
I'm going upstairs.
I'm breaking the emotional connection, and that will also lead me to see the hurt in a different way, because I'm already taking care of the wounded inner child. I'm already reparenting myself. So if I'm reparenting myself, I'm able to have a different communication. If I'm able to have another communication, I can go ahead and relay that to the caretaker, mom, dad, and also break that emotional connection of anger or resentment or whatever other emotion that's attached to it. But yes, you're absolutely right. Forgiveness is the biggest thing. Okay, so when I was working still in the inpatient unit, I must have looked really disgruntled. So this one patient comes up to me, a poet. Oh, poet. This guy was a writer, a poet, extremely artistic. And he told me the following, especially in terms of gratitude. The gratitude is the attitude that takes us to higher altitudes. I can't be grateful if I don't forgive. I need to forgive to find that gratitude within myself, and the gratitude that it's all around me. Because even though perhaps mom or dad or caretaker, whoever raised me, showed and was with their humanness, there was somebody else there in the circle that once again showed me that I am the bee's knees, that I'm the best thing, in their lives, that I'm the center of their universe. And that's what I'm going to be grateful for. And I'm going to add one more thing before we do this, the meditation. And that is also that even through my trials and tribulations here on earth, and through the trials and tribulations that my caretakers and my caregivers gave me, I should find gratitude in those lessons as well. Because if I didn't have those trials and tribulations, I would not have the wisdom. And also as I'm resolving, you know, and giving myself permission to resolve and reparent my inner child, I wouldn't have the compassion and empathy that I have towards others. So I am grateful for having that wound so I can go ahead and take care of it, heal it. I'll have a scar, but that scar is going to remind me of my own empowerment resiliency. I'm thriving. That's why I don't go taking away that, you know, the word victim, because victim is going to hold me hostage. I am thriving. I'm resilient. I made it. I hope that answered it. So, are we all home right now, or are we in a secure location? Is anybody driving? Nobody's driving? Okay. So if nobody is driving, do you folks want to go ahead and do the positive emotion refocusing technique?
Yes, please.
Yes. Alrighty. So what will she? Well, ready? Okay. So I'm going to guide you through. All right, here we go. Feet flat on the floor, back straight in your lap. Close your eyes, nice and slow. Or just stare an imaginary spine in front of you. Take a deep cleansing breath through your nose. Exhale, nice and slow through your mouth. Inhale, calm, and feel how your belly expands. Exhale, relaxed, and feel how your belly goes back to its natural position. Inhale, calm, and feel how your belly expands. Exhale, relaxed, and feel how your belly goes back to its natural position. As you continue with this pattern of breathing, bring up to your mind, bring up to consciousness, person in your past or in your present, that you feel that you are the center of their universe. Or perhaps you want to bring up the image, the memory of a pet that you feel that you have unconditional love from them. Or perhaps you want to bring up a place out in nature that brings you this sense and feeling of total awe. Once that you have the image of that person, that pet, or that place, have it strong in your mind. Visualize it. Be with that person. Be with that pet. Be in that beautiful place out in nature. Now bring an emotion associated. Every time that you think of that person, that you felt that you were the center of their universe, feel that nurturing feeling. Feel that love emanating, radiating from that person towards you, and you feeling towards them. Or every time you think about the pet, feel how that pet just loves you just the way that you are. Unconditional love radiates from that pet or that place out in nature. Bring that emotion every time that you visualize, or every time that you are in that place out in nature. You feel so close to your higher power. You feel the sense of awe and belonging on earth. Now that you have the image of that person, place, or pet, and you have that emotion associated with that memory, bring it down to your heart center. Some people visualize going downstairs, an escalator, an elevator, or just opening up the door and entering to their heart center. Feel now how your heart radiates with unconditional love, with nurturing, with healing. Feel with every breath that you take how that unconditional love and healing radiates through every part of your body. Feel now, with every breath that you take, how every cell, every fiber of your body absorbs unconditional love, the feeling of awe and belongingness, feeling the nurturing, feeling the love. Feel now how you are radiating unconditional love and healing to everyone around you, to every living being around you. And remember, as you are feeling the way you're feeling now and giving all of that love, you are also receiving everybody else's unconditional love and healing onto you. Feel yourself right now centered. Mind, body, and spirit are now in total harmony. For you are tuning connected to your higher power above you, around you, inside of you. You feel yourself connected and belonging here on earth. Calm and relaxed. Calm and relaxed. Calm and relaxed. With each divine healing breath you take. Very gently now. Take another deep breath. Feel how your mind expands. Listen to the sounds around you. Allow yourself to take another deep breath. At the count of 4, you will open up your eyes. Feeling good in every way, bringing unconditional love and healing for yourself, for today and every day moving forward. So 1, 2, 3, feeling divine love in your heart, and on 4, very slowly. Open up your eyes, feeling good in every way.
That really was great, Cristina. And
thank you.
I just want to thank you again, Cristina, for giving this webinar. And like I said on the flyer, we offered this because many of you were in the first webinar that Cristina did back, I think, in October, and this was kind of a follow-up to that. And I think it was well worth the wait. So thank you all for coming. Thank you again, Cristina, for doing this. We really appreciate it. It's always so interesting to have you here and speaking and offering a different kind of perspective on things and doing these breathing and meditative, exercises with us. We really appreciate it.